31 comics of Halloween. We started strong with vampires, but now it's time to go a little demonic. Hello everyone, and welcome back to Married with Comics. I'm your host, Laura. Now, before we get into the good stuff, just a reminder that tomorrow is our 500 subscriber giveaway here on YouTube. We will be live. So if you have been commenting on videos and you're subscribed to the channel, you have been entered into a chance to win this beautiful copy of Nonstop Spider-Man that's been remarked and signed by Ken Lashley. It's stunning, and I can't wait to see who's going to get this added to their collection. I'm really excited for you all. On our live show, we are going to answer your questions. We're going to talk about some upcoming titles that we're grabbing, and there will also be other giveaways that will be available for people who attend the live show. We're going to have a lot of fun. So what's really intriguing to me is when you break these 31 comics of Halloween into different categories, how different the stories end up being. So when you have a category of demons or demon comics, each one of the stories is definitely very unique. And if I'm going to talk about unique stories, I have to start strong and talk to you all about Death Note. Now, before I started this book, I had only read one other manga title, and it was done by an independent writer and artist. I did an interview with her here on the channel, but it was only one issue, and it took a little bit of time to get used to the reading backwards. So I wasn't sure I could really do a full story with manga, and because many of you know with whether it's manga or comics, there are so many different series, it's hard to pick the right one. So Bruce Wayne is a follower here on this channel, and he had reached out and said, I know you guys are interested in reading some manga. Do you mind if I send you some books just as a recommendation to just dip your toes in? I said, absolutely. If you know where to start, we are definitely interested. So he sent us 3 different titles, and this one, of course, was about demons, so I knew I wanted to read it in time for Halloween. I read this about a month and a half ago, and it has been killing me not to grab the rest of the series. Oh my goodness, I read this as quickly as it was humanly possible. I literally sat there on the couch next to Scott on multiple occasions saying, watch something else because I'll be reading this book. Love you, honey. It's that good. I mean, immediately it's drawn in a way that I didn't actually have to concentrate on reading backwards. It flowed so easily, and the characters, the storyline, everything just drew me in. And if I was going to be smart and do this again, I would get the entire set because, yeah, just having volume 1 and 2 completed, it's kind of killing me right now. So Death Note has 3 different main characters. We have our child prodigy, Light. He is 17 years old, and he is absolutely a genius, top of his class, and exceptionally smart. We have our Shinigami demon, which I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, sorry if I'm not, who created and owns the Death Note. However, he's bored, and he kind of purposefully leaves this Death Note, which is basically a blank journal, out, knowing that someone's going to grab it. And the person that, of course, picks it up is Light. So the Death Note has some rules that are written and some rules that are not. And the intriguing thing is that the Shinigami demon will tell you some of the rules in advance, and some of them he won't, intentionally knowing that you are going to trip up and you're going to make a mistake. So the demon sometimes is working with you, sometimes the demon is working against you. He makes it abundantly clear from the very beginning that he is not in it to help you. In some ways, he's just in it to be entertained, but he does also want your soul. It's definitely a bit of a challenge between Light trying to outsmart the Shinigami demon, but then you also have the Death Note itself. So in the Death Note, you can write out a person's name and you can specify how you want them to die and when you want them to die. If, for instance, their death is humanly impossible, it can't be done. So for instance, if you say death by unicorns, it's not going to happen. So you have kind of these rules that we're piecing it together along with him, but the intriguing thing is because Light is so smart, he's already establishing a lot of different ways to make sure he's covering his tracks. So whenever he kills someone, at the beginning, he's making sure it's a heart attack. It's an accidental death that people wouldn't piece together. He's doing a lot of extra things to cover his tracks, make sure that no one accidentally gets a hold of the Death Note. He's doing a lot of really, really smart things. It's one of those moments where instead of just some dumb kid getting a hold of the Death Note and killing a bunch of people and then realizing that, oops, I made a mistake, instead, this is actually one of the smartest people in the world that gets a hold of this book, and now we have to see when or if he's going to get caught. Which leads us to our third character. At the beginning of this story, we have, of course, our local detectives, and one of the lead detectives is Light's father. So he has this insider scoop to figure out what the police know to then be able to anticipate everything and certainly stay ahead of them. Well, the police force start getting assistance from a mysterious person that goes by the name of L. Whenever Light kills someone, he does it under the code name of Kira. But L, on the other hand, is incredibly smart, just like Light is. So L purposefully starts setting up some traps just to see how much Light knows and see if there are some limitations. And one of the first things he discovers is that if he shows his face, that Kira can kill him. So at the very beginning of this story, we don't see L's face until much later on to get an idea of who this mysterious person is. And eventually it becomes this amazing duel between L and Light. And both of them are trying to outsmart the other. Both of them are trying to set traps to then figure out ways to catch the other person. It's incredibly brilliant. And because you have that challenge between the demon and Light, and then of course the actions that Light is trying to take with the Death Note itself. And then of course you have L who's trying to catch Light, Light who's trying to outsmart L, and you have all these different elements that are going on at the same time. It's incredible. Absolutely love the story. If you've never read a manga title, this is definitely a great place to start. I highly recommend it. Now, demon stories continue, and you can't have a demon story without talking about Constantine. So I grabbed, of course, Hellblazer Rise and Fall. It's written by Tom Taylor. It is just a standalone series with 3 issues and gorgeous covers. I was definitely intrigued, and I love the snarkiness of Constantine. Now, for those of you that are vaguely familiar with Constantine, he has shown up in a ton of different series. So you have the Hellblazer series, there is a Constantine series, he shows up in Sandman, he shows up in Justice League Dark. He's all over the place. He hunts demons, he uses dark magic to fight evil forces, and he is a classic British character who broods fantastically. He's the type of character that if you are in the middle of a fight with a bad guy, he will be leaning against a wall, smoking a cigarette, and making fun of you, and wait until like the very last second when maybe your bones are about to break and you're really, really gonna lose. He'll finally put out the cigarette, jump in and help you, and when you sit there and say, "It took you long enough," he'll say something snarky and he will walk away. And that character just, I love reading his stuff. Now, I haven't read everything that involves Constantine because it's a lot, but he is definitely one of those characters that I love laughing with, about, and enjoying. So when I saw that Tom Taylor had written this series, I was like, absolutely, let's check it out. I love his Nightwing run. So the things that he did a really, really good job of. Tom Taylor definitely got the British accent and got the British humor, which British humor should be very dry, and that delivery for Constantine with that snarkiness without making him seem cruel is essential. And I thought that Tom Taylor did a great job with that. The only thing that bugged me in this storyline was actually one element of the artwork, which may not bother anyone else, and it may just be a me thing. So take this with a huge chunk of salt. When I think of Constantine, I actually picture the guy who was cast in the Constantine TV series, which, no, the TV series was not good, but the guy was perfectly cast. In my eyes, Constantine should be ruggedly handsome. The kind of guy that just looks amazing when he is dirty and has a 5 o'clock shadow, and there should always be something where if you actually saw him clean shaven, he just doesn't look right. But there needs to be that kind of attractive quality to him that you understand why women are drawn to him and what some of the allure is beyond the snarkiness. So in this one, he's drawn definitely with the dirty and the 5 o'clock shadow, but he just looks like a mess. Which, I mean, technically the character is meant to be a mess, but you don't have those attractive qualities as well. So I'm like, missing one little thing. This storyline involves a demon escaping and outwitting Lucifer, which you never do. So now Lucifer is coming out and trying to hunt down this demon and get him back to hell and basically prove that Lucifer cannot be beat. So when you have some of those scenes and interactions between Lucifer and Constantine, those are definitely the best. Because we know that Lucifer has that kind of oozing masculinity, sensuality, and sexuality that it's very interesting to see him up against and kind of collaborating with Constantine to catch this demon. That was cool. Overall, though, story-wise, it was not the best Constantine story that I've ever read. The elements were there. There's just, I don't know what the one thing is that they were missing that kind of brings it together. In some ways, I think it could be the demon that they were hunting, because he's not very memorable. I can remember Lucifer in this story, I can remember Constantine in this story, I can remember some of the action and adventure that they took trying to catch the demon, but the demon himself doesn't even stand out in my own memory, and I didn't read this that long ago. And I think that's the biggest failing in this series, which is why it goes into the good, fun adventure category, but not in the best Constantine story I've ever read. You must read it over and over again. Go enjoy, go grab. It's definitely worth reading, but I will say that there are better stories out there featuring Constantine. Next year, don't worry, I will recommend them, but let me know down in the comments if you have a favorite Constantine story, of course. Oh, the Piper. Now, I have been talking to you all about the Piper for months, because this is one of my favorite Zenescope comics. Robin Hood is definitely always going to be my favorite, but this one, it holds a special place. And sadly, this one is so unknown, and because it's a Zenescope title, you can typically find it incredibly cheaply. Why is this special? So this character started in the Grimm Fairy Tale series within Zenescope that I'm always bragging about. So this was one of those instances where they did one individual comic within the Grimm Fairy Tale storyline about the Piper. And because the character was so loved, they then created this offshoot story called The Piper. I know, very original title. But what was also very interesting was this was one of the very first storylines that they had done that was immediately optioned for film. And this is actually drawn and produced in that same way because it had been optioned for film. You'll notice that the page quality and the type of art that they do in this comic, I am literally going to be covering this section here with images from the Piper because the artwork's that good. And I think they instantly knew that this was going to become an amazing film, so they really wanted to pull out all the stops for this comic, but that film still hasn't been created. The other cool thing is that the introduction in this book is done by none other than Tony Todd, the Candyman. The introduction was really cool, but it sets the tone of what they expected for this story, and the fact that it never became kind of a cult classic or a horror movie is sad. But the story itself reads like a horror movie. This is your very, very classic horror story. You have a kid who's being bullied, and one of our main characters from the Grimm Fairy Tale series recommends that he check out the music and incredible art that is written in the original tale of the Piper. And she hands him the book, he goes off and he sees the music that's been written, and then he also reads these kind of incantations. And in the incantations, it mentions that the Piper may appear, and he doesn't really believe it. He's high as all get out, and he's a college kid. The Piper appears, and the Piper offers to give him his heart's unspoken desires. in exchange for paying the piper's price. The thing is, the piper doesn't specify what the price is, and it doesn't specify how many of your heart's desires he's going to be delivering, and in what method. Again, kid's high. Kid doesn't think that this is really going to get as bad as we all know as an audience it is. So he agrees to it. And then people start dying. And it's people that he hates. But then you start seeing some of the ways that these bullies are getting killed. So suddenly our main character just changes his mind. And he's like, okay, contract's off, we're done. And the piper, so when he kills people, he's playing his flute. As he keeps saying, he's creating a symphony. So when the main character tries calling off the contract, the piper says, no, the symphony is not yet finished. I must finish the symphony, and your heart's desires have grown since we last talked, therefore your price has gotten higher as well, and you must pay the piper. We continue with our storyline, and our main character is now trying to figure out how to stop the piper and how to outsmart the piper. That's where it starts also kind of continuing in our normal horror story elements. You know, what if he reads the book, if he reads the incantation backwards, if he finds a different book that has this story, what if he goes to the original piper, if he finds the woman who gave him the book, any number of these different things, can he stop the piper? I will say that this story is fun. I know, some of you are like, well, is it like the best horror story you've ever read? No, because my expectation of like the best horror story that I've read in this entire list of 31 comics, it's really, really high expectations. So to even make the list of really good is still great. So don't ask me the best, because that's a really, really short list. What I will say is, if you like Final Destination kind of horror stories where, yes, people are dying left and right and you realize that you're accountable for their deaths and you're trying to stop it, can you outsmart them, and that kind of roller coaster ride type of storyline, absolutely grab the piper. You can easily find this 50% off, or even sometimes in a $5 bin. No one is paying attention to this title. So grab it, read it, and let me know what you think, because I think you'll be very, very surprised by the piper. Now, I can't talk about 31 Comics of Halloween without mentioning at least one Joe Hill House Comics series. So Joe Hill, for those of you that know, is the son of Stephen King. Joe Hill has created some of my favorite stories, such as Lock and Key, which, yes, we are talking about Lock and Key eventually. And you have other writers that are creating titles and horror titles, but are kind of under that Joe Hill House category. So Basket Full of Heads, a lot of fun. Dollhouse was one that was recommended to me. So Dollhouse, we start with our main character who is a child. And she's given this dollhouse from a family member who leaves it to her in her will, and she of course starts playing with the little dollhouse inside. Well, somehow she finds this incantation that she can read, and suddenly she shrinks to size and she can, in essence, enter the dollhouse. And suddenly all the little dolls are alive, and everyone can't wait to have her there to play. So as she starts interacting with the house, she starts, seeing something's not quite right. But all the main characters keep saying how they want her to stay. And she can't possibly leave, her mother and her real life, so she always leaves the dollhouse and then comes back to go play. Well, suddenly you start seeing that the dollhouse is very interested in having her stay there on a permanent basis, but she has to choose. As kind of problems in life keep happening, the dollhouse will then offer, if you stay here forever, I will fix this problem. Whether it's a bully, whether it's a health issue, whether it's protecting another family member, this deal with the dollhouse keeps being offered. So we have our main character, who then grows up and magically has a daughter of her own, who also ends up with the dollhouse. So now you have the mother who knows that something's not right with the dollhouse, and how does she protect her child from something that is always kind of luring her in? And then how do you defeat the the dollhouse if you're trapped inside. This one was a ton of fun. I read this, of course, late at night, and there's just something about the concept and this storyline that kept drawing me back in. But I wasn't sure this was going to be the story for me. However, I finished this in one sitting. There was no way I was going to fall asleep without completing this storyline, and any story that hooks me that well, especially when I'm just going to read a couple pages, always ends up higher on the list. So this was definitely enjoyable. I think we all enjoy a story of whether it's someone getting into a bad situation and then trying to figure their way back out, or it's these things that should be innocent and sweet, such as a dollhouse, and it becoming something that is something you should be very, very afraid of. And we all know that some of those little dolls are just a little creepy. So this was a perfect Halloween title for me. Last but not least, Outcast. Now, I got ridiculously lucky. I wanted to read this title, but I couldn't find it, and I was like, you know what, I have 31 other comics and other titles that I'm already cutting from this list. I'll just skip it. And then I went to Play for Life Comics here in Wake Forest, and they just received that day a complete set of Outcast trade paperbacks. Now, this series, just like Death Note, it is killing me not to finish it. I had to intentionally force myself to stop reading this story, because otherwise all we'd be talking about this Halloween is Outcast. It was that good. Each one of these volumes I complete in one sitting, and it is fantastic. So with this one, we are talking more about demon possession. So we have our main character who is a complete mess. He has given up on life, and we know something bad happened to him. We just don't know all the details of it. Our main character ends up in the same space as a child who has been possessed by a demon. And at one point, the child tries attacking our main character and bloodies his nose. And finally, when our main character tries fighting back and touches the boy and starts kind of bleeding on him, suddenly the boy starts to scream, and now suddenly you see this kind of wafting coming out of the boy's mouth, and the demon is completely exorcised, despite all the other things that that priest has been doing for days, if not weeks, to try and exorcise this demon. So now we've got to figure out, why is this main character so special? And then we start looking into, is it the demons picking, loved ones around him? Or is there a very specific reason that he is constantly being drawn into this story? And the demons keep saying that he is special because he's an outcast. By volume 2, we still don't have any answers as to what that means, which I'm also okay with. So Robert Kirkman does an exceptional job of creating some incredibly flawed main characters. So we start with our main character, Kyle, who is incredibly flawed, has given up hope on everything, and then suddenly realizes that he has this ability. Well, then we also find out about the priest, who also has his flaws. And because of that kind of reality check with those characters, instead of it being the perfect person who has noble intentions, so you start to appreciate some of the things that are coming out of this series because of all these different elements that are tying together. You care about these characters. You care about the family members that are trying to help them. You're drawn in. Even though I have about 3 questions for every answer, I don't care. I still want to keep reading. So I think that Robert Kirkman does a fantastic job of just building this storyline, building these conflicts, and then just waiting to see how far we're willing to go down the rabbit hole to get our answers. And I will say, for me, I'll go as far as necessary because it's that good. If you like The Exorcist and you like those kind of demon possession stories, but then you want to see more, you want to see beyond it, what if the demons themselves could plot and could collaborate? What if there was some way that you could get more from that kind of story? Absolutely, you're going to love Outcast. Soon I will be finishing this series, but so far at the very beginning, I'm in. 110%. Love this series. So the big question for you all is, which demon stories do you like? Have you read? Are you looking forward to reading? Because there are tons of them. Those are just 5 great examples. And the best part is that there are more titles to come. So let me know down in the comments. I love hearing your recommendations. And I can't wait to talk to you all next time about our next spooky topic. Please don't forget to subscribe and have a great day, everyone.